Flames roared through the stable roof, black smoke choking the sky. 6 federal contract foals were already lost.
It was an accident. The cleanup pile just caught. We never meant for this.
Daniel Reeves did not answer. He just stared into the fire, eyes stinging but dry, gloved hands motionless at his sides. Then a black sedan with federal plates stopped at the gate. 2 USDA agents stepped out, tan uniforms sharp against the ash.
Mr. Reeves, I'm Agent Peterson, USDA. That placard says these were federal property.
Federal property? Those were just horses, stinking animals that shouldn't have been here.
Ma'am, you destroyed 6 Morgan foals bred for the U.S. Park Police. This is now a federal crime scene.
Michelle's mouth opened, but no words came. The sign burned into her understanding. USDA APIS contract. Daniel still hadn't moved. But behind his stillness lay a secret that had just turned a local fire into a federal crime. And to understand how it started, you have to go back 4 months earlier, when the first HOA complaint landed on his kitchen table. 4 months earlier, Daniel Reeves's ranch breathed peace. Morgan horses grazed against the Rockies, the stable a crisp white postcard.
From the Ridgeview Homeowners Association. I don't even live in their development. This has to be a mistake.
The letter cited persistent odor and insect nuisances threatening community health and property values. It demanded immediate remediation or daily fines.
Your animals are making the entire community sick, Mr. Reeves. We have standards here and you're violating every one of them.
Ma'am, my property is agricultural land outside the HOA's jurisdiction. The sheriff has already confirmed I'm within my rights.
Mrs. Drummond, I've told you before, raising horses isn't a crime. Unless you've got evidence of a real violation, I can't cite him.
Then I'll find a way. This isn't over, not by a long shot.
She meant it. Over the next 8 months, 47 complaints piled up. Noise, flies, runoff, every regulation was a weapon.
I'm sorry, Daniel. She's within her rights to file, even if everyone's baseless. My hands are tied by the paperwork.
She'll never stop, will she? One day her patience will snap, and then...
Michelle's patience frayed faster than rope in a storm. At the next HOA meeting, she stood before the board with a fixed smile.
We need a community cleanup day. Show this neighborhood takes pride and handles its own problems.
She gestured at a laminated map, tracing a line along the fence that bordered Daniel Reeves' property.
And we'll burn the debris right there. Cheap, efficient, and it clears the sightlines entirely.
The motion passed with a thin majority. That night, Michelle sat alone at her kitchen table, sketching a different map.
If the burn pile leans just a few feet west against the stable wall, the afternoon wind does the rest.
She circled the spot, slipped the map into her planner, and by morning, flyers blanketed the neighborhood. Pinned to the community corkboard, a cheerful flyer read, "Ridgeview HOA Cleanup Day. Bring gloves and a neighborly spirit." Below the smiling cartoon sun, small print listed the burn pile location. County line access adjacent to agricultural parcel.
48 complaints, all dead ends. This time I'll clear the air myself.
Saturday dawned bright and brittle. Volunteers gathered at the county line, trash bags flapping in a dry wind. Michelle arrived in a crisp pink blouse, directing volunteers to stack the burn pile right against the stable wall.
Right there, as close as you can. The wind will carry the smoke away from us.
That pile is too close. The stable is dry as kindling. You need to move it back.
This is HOA business. Your eyesore is the real hazard. Step aside.
Daniel tried to argue, but the volunteers averted their eyes and piled the debris higher. The afternoon wind shifted. Sparks drifted from the smoldering heap, riding the gust straight toward the stable. Daniel shouted a warning, but no one heard. The first orange tongue licked the stable's baseboard. Within heartbeats, the flames caught, racing up the dry old wood. Smoke thickened. The stable was alight. Daniel could only stare, knowing what was inside and what was about to be lost. Daniel bolted toward the stable doors, smoke scorching his throat. He screamed for the horses, but the roar drowned him out. Inside, the Morgan horses screamed and kicked at their stalls. The 6 foals huddled in back, eyes white with terror.
The foals. Get the foals first.
A wall of flame erupted across the aisle, swallowing the stalls. The roof timbers groaned and buckled. A fire engine screamed up the gravel drive, far too late. Hoses unspooled, but the heat was already dying. By the time the last flame smothered, the stable was a skeleton. 6 perfect foals were gone. A young veterinarian who helped fight the fire glanced at the singed placard and murmured, "Federal stock." No one heard. Daniel sank to his knees in the ash, his plaid shirt blackened, his hands shaking. He didn't cry. Not yet.
Sarah brought this contract home. It was all I had left of her work.
The fire was out. But the truth those ashes concealed was only beginning to burn. As the last embers died, Michelle hurried to the fire captain, already shaping the story.
Captain, I saw it all. The wind took an ember from the community cleanup, an unavoidable accident.
Ma'am, I've been doing this 20 years. That burn pile was deliberately placed, and we're picking up traces of accelerant.
Accelerant? No, that's impossible. Maybe the ranch owner had chemicals stored inside.
The captain's eyes narrowed. He'd heard that deflection before.
Captain Keller, my deputies said you found something unusual.
Sheriff, I'd say this fire had help getting started. Might want to talk to the HOA president again.
I cooperated fully. This is malicious speculation. You should be questioning the owner.
Daniel stood nearby, his face unreadable, but inside, the word contract burned like the fire itself. The sheriff pulled out his notebook. The investigation had just shifted from accident to arson. Sheriff Owens gestured for Michelle to step aside. His pen hovered, ready to catch every slip.
That man's stable was a death trap. Sawdust and old rags piled everywhere. I knew this would happen.
You knew? Did you file any code complaints about these rags?
I filed dozens. Ask your department. He must have bribed someone to keep quiet.
The sheriff had read every one of those complaints, all dismissed. His pen didn't move.
Mr. Reeves? She says your stable was a fire hazard? You got an answer?
47 complaint dismissals in a drawer. Every one. Same conclusion. No violation.
From the corner of his eye, the sheriff saw the fire investigator hold up a melted lamp base, its wick drenched in kerosene.
Accusations without proof. Proof without admission. She's lying about everything.
He snapped his notebook shut. The case was far from over, but one thing was clear. The HOA president had just become suspect. Long after the deputies left, Daniel walked the blackened site alone. His boots crunched through frozen ash, half buried beneath a collapsed beam. The USDA APIS contract placard still clung to its post, scorched but unbroken.
She nailed this sign herself the day she brought the contract home. Said the whole country would know who we served.
Memory cut through the smoke. A younger Sarah, sleeves rolled up, smiled beside a foal as she signed the federal contract. She'd been the contracting officer. Every foal born under that agreement was a living duty to the park police.
6 foals gone. Her signature is still on that paper. That makes this more than horse theft.
He pulled out his phone. The number was still saved from Sarah's old files. USDA APIS Investigative Services.
This is Daniel Reeves. Contract number 4492K04. There's been a fire. 6 federal breeding stock are dead.
The voice on the other end went silent, then crisp with protocol. They'd be on site by morning. As the call ended, Daniel looked at the placard. The fire had taken his stables, but it hadn't taken the truth. By 7 the next morning, a black government sedan rolled through the ranch gate, dust devils chasing its tires. Agents Peterson and Ramirez stepped out, their tan uniforms stiff with purpose. They surveyed the ruin with practiced eyes.
What is this? Who are you? This is private property.
Agent Peterson, USDA APHIS. I'm holding a federal contract that lists this stable as a designated breeding facility.
And according to this placard, singed but still legible, the 6 foals lost in that fire were U.S. Park Police mounts in training.
That's absurd. They were just farm animals. He was raising them for profit.
Ma'am, the contract is explicit. Destroying federal property is a crime, and we're ordered to secure the site pending a full arson investigation. Daniel stood 20 feet away, arms folded, saying nothing. His silence was louder than any accusation.
I want my lawyer. You can't barge in here and throw around accusations without proof.
Agent Ramirez didn't blink. She simply raised her tablet, the contract number glowing on the screen, and informed the HOA president that the USDA had all the proof they needed. The agents began their evidence sweep, gloved fingers sifting through the char where the burn pile had stood. Agent Ramirez lifted a singed matchbook, its cover still legible. Ridgeview Country Club, members only. That's Drummond's club. She's on their board, and this matchbook is 3/4 empty. A neighbor, Mr. Halpern, had already told deputies he saw Mrs. Drummond strike the match that lit the pile. Did he specify the time? The elderly man confirmed without hesitation. Hot pink blouse, blonde bob. He remembered she laughed when the kindling caught. From behind the yellow police tape, Michelle watched, one hand pressed over her mouth, her polished nails digging into her palm.
Place the matchbook in evidence. The burn pile, the accelerant, the witness, it's all leading to one name.
The matchbook went into an evidence bag, tagged and numbered. Beside it, the melted lamp base from the sheriff's deputy. The USDA had come to investigate a federal contract loss. Now they were building a federal arson case against one woman. 2 hours later, Michelle Drummond sat in a bare federal interview room. The matchbook photo centered on the table.
I've already told you people it was a tragic accident. Why am I being treated like a criminal?
Peterson slid an evidence bag across the table. The Ridgeview Country Club matchbook, singed and empty, stared back at her. Your club. Your prints. A witness says you struck the match yourself, laughing. The pile was doused with kerosene from a lamp we traced to your garage.
No, I didn't. I only wanted him cited, fined, not this. I never meant for the horses to...
But you did. 6 foals, federal agents' future mounts. You lit that fire knowing the stable was dry and the wind was blowing straight.
I just wanted the smell gone. Those animals, they ruined everything. I thought if the stable burned, he'd finally leave.
Agent Peterson stood, reciting the charge. Federal arson, destruction of government property, 6 counts of animal cruelty under federal law. In the observation room, Daniel watched through the one-way glass, his face unreadable, a tremor in his jaw the only sign of emotion. As agents cuffed her wrists, Michelle Drummond's reign over Ridgeview HOA ended. But the damage she'd done was just beginning to ripple through the entire community. 3 days later, a certified package arrived at the Ridgeview HOA office, a federal demand letter, thick with legal weight. The USDA contract 4492K04 was valued at $2.7 million. Under federal law, your association is jointly liable for treble damages. That's over $5 million.
Your president's actions triggered a federal arson investigation. The HOA can be named as a co-defendant unless you cooperate fully.
The room erupted into panicked whispers. One board member threw his pen across the table, his face crimson.
A man in the back stood up, jabbing his finger at the letter. She burned a federal stable, and we all pay? This is Drummond's mess! Another voice joined in from across the room. My insurance won't cover this. If we're sued, I lose my house.
The board chairman, a retired dentist named Gerald, banged the gavel weakly. We have to consider bankruptcy protection. Bankruptcy won't shield you from criminal complicity if anyone else knew about Drummond's plan. We'll need full board minutes and all complaint records. Silence suffocated the room. The board realized they hadn't just enabled a bully, they'd financed a federal crime. Outside, residents gathered demanding answers. The HOA that once terrorized Daniel Reeves was now the target of fury it couldn't escape. That evening, as the HOA chaos settled, Daniel drove to Cedar Hill Cemetery and parked beside the old oak. He knelt before the headstone, tracing the engraved horseshoe beside her name.
They arrested Michelle today. She'll face federal charges, but she doesn't understand what she really destroyed.
From his coat pocket, he drew a worn photograph. Him and Sarah, arms around each other, a Morgan full between them. He remembered the day she signed the APIS contract, her proud pen strokes beneath the U.S. Department of Agriculture seal.
Her name is on that contract, not mine. She was the contracting officer. This fire wasn't just animal cruelty, it was a desecration of her work.
For years, the contract had been his quiet anchor. Now it was his weapon, and her signature was the proof.
I'll make sure the court sees it, Sarah. This wasn't just about horses. This was about you.
He pressed his palm flat against the cold granite, a silent oath. Then he stood, back straight, and walked toward the truck. The trial was weeks away, but Daniel Reeves now carried an argument no defense could dismiss, and a promise he would keep. 2 weeks before trial, a certified letter from Drummond's attorney landed on Daniel's table. The letter had promised full restitution and a sealed record.
Rebuild the stable, pay damages, and I drop the federal complaint. They really don't understand what I lost. No deal. Tell Drummond's lawyer the only thing I'll sign is a victim impact statement for the judge.
That evening, a flashy sedan stopped at his gate. Michelle Drummond stepped out, no longer in pink, but pale and trembling.
Daniel, please, take the money, rebuild your stables. I'll resign. Leave the HOA, leave the state. Just don't send me to prison.
Daniel stood on the other side, arms folded. He looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head once. Michelle slid a second offer under the gate, a personal check for $500,000, and a promissory note for the rest.
She still thinks this is about money. It was never about money. It was about her and those foals.
He didn't pick it up. He didn't even break stride. The envelope sat in the dust until the evening wind carried it away. Michelle watched from the sedan, her face collapsing. The one man she thought she could manipulate had just turned his back and walked away. The morning after her failed gate plea, Michelle's legal team filed a motion to suppress. They claimed the matchbook was planted and the witness coerced.
They're trying to make this about me, not the fire. About my grief, my stability.
In the deposition, the defense attorney leaned across the table. His voice dripped false sympathy.
My wife's been gone 4 years. That contract was her work, not my reason for being here.
The attorney pressed harder, asking if Daniel had sought psychiatric help after the fire. He implied the grief had broken his reason.
I don't need a psychiatrist to know the difference between an accident and a kerosene-soaked lamp.
Throughout the attacks, his voice never rose. He sat with the same stoic calm he'd held at the fire.
She can throw mud. It won't stick. The evidence is clean, and so is my conscience.
The judge denied the suppression within 72 hours. The chain of evidence was unbroken. The witness unimpeachable. The trial date was locked. Daniel Reeves had withstood the worst they could throw, and now he was ready to speak for those who couldn't. The federal courthouse doors closed behind Daniel Reeves. Inside, United States v. Michelle Drummond began. The prosecution's first witness, Agent Peterson. He described the burn pile, the matchbook, the kerosene-soaked lamp.
The matchbook was almost fully consumed, but the Ridgeview Country Club logo was still legible.
Defense tried to challenge the chain of custody, but Peterson's answers never wavered. Then the neighbor, Mr. Halpern, took the stand. He identified Mrs. Drummond without hesitation. When Michelle Drummond herself was called, the gallery went silent. She walked to the stand in a beige dress, her face a mask of composure.
I never intended to harm anyone. The wind took an ember. It was a terrible, tragic accident. The matchbook? Yes, it's from my club, but I must have dropped it during the cleanup. Anyone could have picked it up.
Mrs. Drummond, you will answer the question directly. Did you or did you not light that burn pile?
Her answer was a stammer, then silence. By the time she stepped down, her defense was in tatters, and the courtroom knew it. Then the prosecution called its final witness, Daniel Reeves. He walked to the stand as calmly as he had walked through the ash.
They had names: Noble, Valor, Spirit, Grace, Honor, Legacy, 6 Morgan foals, each bred to serve the United States Park Police. Noble would nuzzle your shoulder like a friend. Valor never spooked, not even in thunder. Grace could read a mood before you felt it yourself.
The gallery had gone deathly still. A woman in the front row pressed a tissue to her eyes. Even the court reporter paused. Judge Margaret Holt leaned forward, her reading glasses forgotten. Her hand drifted to the small horse brooch pinned beneath her robe.
They weren't livestock. They were public servants in training, and they died because one woman couldn't stand the smell of hay. And my wife, Sarah Reeves, was the federal contracting officer. Her signature made them not just ours, but the nation's.
A murmur ran through the courtroom. The defense attorney didn't object. He couldn't. Judge Holt removed her glasses, pressing her fingers to the bridge of her nose. For a long moment, the courtroom hung in silence. Daniel stepped down, and everyone present knew the trial's weight had shifted. The verdict was not yet spoken, but the truth was already judged. Closing arguments lasted less than 20 minutes. The prosecution stood, pointed to the evidence board, and sat down. The defense barely looked up. Judge Holt removed her glasses, looked at Michelle Drummond, and asked her to rise. Michelle rose on unsteady legs, her beige dress wrinkled, her composure finally cracked.
On the charge of federal arson, this court finds you guilty. On destruction of government property, guilty. On 6 counts of animal cruelty under federal law, guilty on all counts.
The words struck like a gavel on stone. Michelle's knees buckled. Her attorney caught her elbow, but she sagged, a raw sob escaping.
This court has heard enough. Sentencing will follow immediately.
Judge Holt's voice carried an edge of personal offense. She spoke of the contract signed by Sarah Reeves as a sacred trust, and the foals as servants of the public good. In the gallery, Daniel Reeves closed his eyes. A single tear tracked through the faint soot that still seemed to shadow his face. The courtroom held its breath. The verdict was done, but the punishment about to be spoken would set a precedent the HOA would never forget. Michelle stared at the floor, her world collapsing into a narrow cell she could already feel closing around her. Judge Holt raised her gavel, then set it aside. She wouldn't need it. Her voice would be the final blow.
Mrs. Drummond, you burned a federal facility built by a dead woman's honor. You killed 6 public servants who never harmed you. I have raised horses my whole life. Sarah Reeves' signature on that contract is a sacred trust. You desecrated it for spite. Therefore, I sentence you to 10 years in federal prison, $500,000 in restitution, and a permanent ban from any HOA office.
Michelle's wail cut the silence. She crumpled against her attorney, legs giving way, the full weight of a decade in a cell crashing down. In the gallery, Daniel Reeves did not smile. He simply nodded once, as if a long-held breath had finally been released. No one clapped. No one spoke. The sentence was too heavy for celebration.
This court is adjourned. May the memory of those 6 foals serve as a warning to anyone who believes property rights are a weapon.
Marshals moved toward the defendant's table. Michelle's wrists were cuffed, not for flight, but for disappearance into a system she'd never imagined touching her. Daniel watched her go, then turned toward the doors. Justice had been spoken, but the HOA's reckoning was still waiting outside. 3 days after sentencing, federal agents arrived at the Ridgeview HOA office with a final order.
By order of the United States District Court, the Ridgeview Homeowners Association is dissolved. All assets are frozen pending settlement.
The chairman, Gerald, signed without a word. His hands trembled as he wrote his name for the last time. Outside, a workman unbolted the carved wooden sign that had hung for 20 years. It came down in silence. The community gathered, watching the sign no longer cast its shadow over their mailboxes. No one protested. That evening, a local news segment broke the story across the state. The broadcast showed Michelle's mugshot beside the headline, "HOA President Sentenced to 10 Years in Federal Arson Case." The reporter added that the HOA had been dissolved, its remaining funds absorbed by the federal court for victim restitution. In his kitchen, Daniel Reeves reached out and powered down the TV. The screen went black, and silence returned. For the first time in a year, the community heard nothing but wind. The HOA that had terrorized Daniel Reeves was now nothing but a memory. Months later, where ash had blackened the soil, fresh pine beams rose against the mountain sky. Daniel Reeves stood at the fence, the morning sun warm on his shoulders. Below, a small herd of Morgan horses nosed through the green pasture. Near the stable door, a bronze plaque caught the light. In memory of Sarah Reeves and the 6 foals who served the public good. Noble, valor, spirit, grace, honor, legacy.
They're remembered now, not just in my heart, but in stone.
He let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding, and finally, a small smile crossed his weathered face. The wind that once carried fire now carried only the scent of hay and wild clover. He walked toward the horses, curry comb in hand, ready for the day's quiet work. Justice had been served, and on the land his wife loved, Daniel Reeves was finally at peace. Sometimes the smallest placard is the heaviest chain. For Daniel Reeves, justice was not a gavel or a headline. It was a federal contract signed by the woman who never stopped protecting what she loved. And in the end, the horses that someone tried to silence still run free in the mountain light. The HOA is gone. The bully is in prison. But the real victory is quieter than that. It's a man who kept his promise, and a wife whose name will never be forgotten. When they ask what justice looks like, you can point to a placard, a plaque, and a man who refused to back down. If this story meant something to you, share it, because sometimes the smallest sign can carry the weight of the law.